If you do not come out in favor of self-driving cars, I will maybe can you move that rule?
Once it starts,
make sure you tell them that
I will. So
Let's go to this one.
he wants me to go.
You know what? I like you. No, I like you. I like what you do in your spare time, so I'm gonna move back. Number 8, no leaving and back.
Something is not telling me to do.
You already said you were going first. Being on fair, you decided you were going first rather than me. Yeah.
Very professional. Let's go.
I'm like friends with.
Oh, obviously. So first I can go to the wig, crash it, and then you're gonna lose it. What? This doesn't make any sense to me.
What is it? Tell me.
Oh, yeah, so Scott.
He's gonna send me
Get
that
that code. You got it. I was one who requested it.
Called your dad.
I used to read your presentation. The greatest invention is Apple.
Sorry, you're doing that.
I was so scared, so it's like, you just like, I'm like, did you really make me do this? Catch you out, and I was like, wow, he's like, don't plan, because the best we can get you. Like, I'm like, okay, I'll catch you out. Then he comes with that, he's like, dude, it totally breaks me, man.
They may just switch on it.
Stay in the room with David. You and who else is staying in that room?
It didn't even tell you.
Copy and paste the
Wait, how many people fit in one room over there?
Talia, they're trying to take a picture.
Who do you want in your room?
Copy paste the entire This is who I want in my cabinet.
So, butterflies in my eating side.
I'll go inside their cabinet. Inside my cabinet.
Don't mess up your clothes, kid. It's the biggest moment of your life.
I'll kill you, Mosh.
Hey, this is Abby Shun C. Oh, yeah, for Mike. Gotcha. For Mike.
Josh asked for don't even know. Don't ask me, okay?
Wait, when do you go skiing? Is it on Friday or Sunday?
Like I looked at it last night.
What do you mean? Jaco!
I didn't do work.
4 minutes?
Now it's not. I told Mom you on Friday. Mom, don't want to do
That was the girl that get there.
Oh yeah.
And then we slept at your house for Ron brought Twix for everyone.
What?
Ron, remember we all slept at Yago's house?
But the party was awful. Like,
A bag of what?
and we watched.
Oh yeah! Remember, I gave everyone twigs and I had none left for me and no one would give me one. Dude, I bought like a whole bag for like $5 and no one gave me.
I'm surprised I can bring like a black trash bag full of carrot chicken.
Alright, we should have a 40-year-old virgin still.
Alright, do you still have any?
We just watch.
No. You know what? Today I actually had a different one.
You know what they do with Mika Locus's room? There's not like 50 chickens in there.
We had the best cabin, and the seniors kept coming in to taste something, and Ezra Blau walked out with her. So that is not a...
What?
He just took our toaster out of the wall and walked back to his cabin.
I remember Evan was really trying to stab me with a knife 2 years ago.
For real?
Yeah, remember he was
I wasn't
going
there.
crazy? Oh, yeah.
Dude, wait, when is the ski on Sunday? Like in the morning? And then when do you get back?
Sunday.
At what time?
Hey, we're gonna have to come on the way.
Yeah, you know, some of this one is right off the side.
Maybe he has pressure on him.
So we're scheduled to start at 3:10, so I'm just gonna wait it out in case there's a straggler that wants to be here to see, I don't know, Medad or something, or SB.
I see Midnight's family.
How's it going?
We all know your whole family too.
Everyone who cares about you too.
Garrett's not here. He's coming from lower school. He's fine. I'm joking. Also, grandfather's here.
Oh my gosh.
I will do this. Zoe. Zoe. You're an AP lady. Yeah.
When my dad started.
Yeah. Everybody's staring at me.
Yo, we still got 5 more minutes.
Alright, y'all. Ooh, I heard a little this is a lot right here, yeah. Come on.
How many different things come together?
Alright, y'all. Well, welcome to the 2017 Cause Fair. Let me explain very briefly what you're about to see for the guests. So, what you're going to see is modeled after an academic conference. We have a panel of students who have all presented or prepared presentations, starting as a research paper, where they were asked to sort of identify inequality and injustice, something they're perceived as wrong with the world, to write about it, make people care about it, and then propose sort of a small, actionable, doable thing that maybe we can do on the local level that can help this much larger problem. So they took these very long research papers and they squished them down into about a 5-minute prepared speech with an accompanying visual. So you're going to see them give their speech. We'll see all 4 presenters go, and at the end we'll have some time for questions and answers. So if you do have questions, save them for the end. The remarks that they're going to give are all prepared, so we want this to be a nice kind of distraction-free environment, so you know how easy it is to get thrown off of track, and we don't want that to happen to them. But after each one presents, we'll have some time for everybody to ask questions and get some feedback. And please do ask them questions, because they've been studying and researching their topics for a really long time. They've all become experts in the field that they've studied, and they are dying to show off their knowledge. So as they're presenting, do think about ways to grill them afterwards, so they can impress you then. All right? Any questions before we get going? Okay, awesome. So first we're going to hear from Brad Flory.
What do you believe is the most important piece of technology in your modern world of 2017? Is it maybe the recent advancements in agriculture or the reintroduction of virtual reality to our world? I'd like you to think about that for a moment. No, the answer that I'm looking for is, of course, the internet. I'm sure you all have answers, but I'm not going to ask any of you. You get my point, though, right? The internet is something that affects everyone's lives daily. I mean, just look on the street and you see thousands of people on their phones using things like Amazon and Google and everyone's favorite, Facebook. But I'd like everyone to think for a moment about their internet and cable bills. I'd like a raise of hands in the room. Who here has Comcast or Xfinity? Okay, now who has AT&T? Okay, here's the third question. Who in the room has Windstream? Yeah, exactly. The government has been making deals with these big internet companies, in particular Comcast and AT&T, that let them have a collective monopoly over the internet market in the United States. Likewise, they can set their own prices and can rely on outdated technologies even in 2017. So I believe that if we can introduce newer technologies, we can then lower the prices and end their monopoly. So how about some background? Why would the government sign to create a monopoly with them? Well, the government wants one thing: information. When they sign this contract, the government has full access to the information of all of of all of their users. So by getting this, they can obviously track terrorists or thieves or any criminal. But by extension, they can pry into anyone's lives regardless of your consent about this. And also, because of this monopoly, if you take a look at the numbers, Comcast has a whopping 30.76% market share. So any company who wants to attempt to lay down their own cable lines and market themselves, by the time that's all said and done, they'd literally be committing corporate suicide in doing so because there wouldn't be enough money intake for them. So more history here. In the mid-2000s, that's when the cable companies like Comcast and AT&T began marketing themselves, and likewise, that's when the government stepped in. And basically what they're able to do is they're able to set their own prices, not only for like the lower class who maybe can't afford it, but for even the middle class and upper class. Comcast and AT&T are able to set their prices equally as bad for every class because they can just assess who the person is and likewise change the price for them. Not only that, but behind our backs, Comcast and AT&T have signed anti-competition agreements with each other, which, last time I checked, is still completely illegal. The Sherman Antitrust Act is still in effect in 2017. So, what are some people doing? Well, in Montana, there are some high schools, although I'm showing a picture of a much better high school here. There are some high schools, there's a high school district in Montana that's actually installing their own fiber internet lines. Now, fiber is a great type of internet. It's super fast. It's a bit more expensive to install, but it's very long. It's a very long-term solution. So, the school district in Montana, along with the local government, actually contracted out this company that specializes in this sort of stuff for their clients. And throughout the school district, they made their own fiber lines from school to school. And the nice thing is they don't have to pay a monthly fee after the initial installation because they manage it all for themselves. And this isn't even just something that's in Montana. It's been happening in other states, like even New York City, which is much harder to install in. But the fact is that there's a want for this in these kinds of places. So, what do I think that we should all do? Well, I think that we need to call our local government offices and make a change, go on change.org, make all the petitions. No. That's a horrible idea. What am I saying? No. I mean, when you make a petition or call your government, they don't want to listen to you. That's the worst thing for you to do. You need to take action for yourself. So what am I going to do? Well, I realize that I'm living on a very small street. I mean, Google Maps is just a tiny little street. And recently, the committee for my street has actually been, they've been having arguments about how are we going to handle the internet situation in the future. So what I believe that I need to do personally is go to these meetings and explore this idea with them, because I believe that on a small scale like this, that we can actually install our own fiber lines for just the street and get way cheaper internet in the long run that stays fast. But for all of you, I'm sure that a lot of people in this room happen to live in the Toco Hills area. So, because of that, I think that the Toco Hills area, although quite a lot bigger than my one street, I do believe that if everyone in the Toco Hills community comes together, that they can create fast internet for themselves at a relatively cheap cost. And by doing that, everyone will prosper in the future. Thank you.
Well done, Brad. Thank you, Brad. All right. Next we hear from SD Cohen. SD, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. You good, Brad? Put this one down.
Picture this. You're homeless and sleeping in the dank and noisy streets that turn into your nightmares at dark. Your parents may be caring and selfless, but they can't afford to give you the kind of life that you need. Or maybe you have a roof over your head, but your parents hardly look your way, forgetting to feed and care for you for whatever the reason or for no reason at all. Perhaps your parents abuse you on a regular basis, and every bone in your body aches from the hands of your own parents. As an attempt to help you, one day a social worker intervenes to take you away from either of these situations and place you in the foster care system. No family, no safety, no stability. You're lonely, scared, and sad. You are a foster child. And while anxiety is already setting in, you have no idea that a future of struggling emotionally, behaviorally, and academically is ahead of you. Foster care was created to provide a temporary placement plan for children that do not have a stable living environment. Homelessness, neglect, and domestic abuse have all been found as factors that lead to children being placed in the system. With that said, foster care is supposed to be a safe experience that helps children move on from these setbacks, but this is often not the case. The system of foster care has some evident positive aspects which make it carry out its purpose, such as enabling uncared-for children to live in a more secure environment, providing monetary compensation and other resources for the foster parents, creating new families, and assisting with the transition of older kids aging out of foster care. However, while keeping the benefits of foster care in mind, there are many more holes within the system that unfortunately outweigh these positive aspects. These include having negligent caseworkers and ending up in equally abusive homes, living with foster parents who are poor, being split up from their siblings, and the most significant, moving around too often. But regardless of all the flaws present in foster care, there is still hope for a solution. Along with the other faults in foster care, moving from foster house to foster house often causes emotional and behavioral challenges. Researcher McFadden realized that it is hard to find good homes to put foster children in, and due to various reasons, the first home usually does not last. Foster child Debbie was separated from her siblings by New Jersey's Department of Youth and Family Services and recalls being in 11 or 12 homes since. She remembers going to school and coming home, finding her bags packed. Nobody even told her where she was going. She said, "You have to build up a wall so you don't get too close." In one of the homes, she was sexually abused and said, "I felt like nothing. I wanted to be with my real brothers and sisters again." On top of being alone, Debbie wound up more emotionally hurt than in her prior situation. This is clearly not the goal of foster care. These placement changes also mean that foster children switch schools frequently. Per move, it's expected that children lose 4 to 6 months of academic progress, and most foster children are too emotionally damaged and have too many behavioral challenges to even try to succeed academically, which puts their futures at risk. If foster children are depressed, school is the last thing on their minds, and if they're experiencing aggression, they will just get into trouble in school. If foster children are worried about whether they'll get beaten or even fed tomorrow, why would they remember to do their project on the Columbian Exchange? If these children feel unstable and experience withdrawal because they were just separated from their siblings, maybe for forever, why would they care about their classes? And if they have painful memories pasted in their minds, how will they refrain from breaking down throughout the school day? Former foster youth are 5 times as likely to experience PTSD than the average person. Plus, 52% of all foster children are prescribed psychiatric drugs. The amount of children in foster care is much too significant for us to just watch their futures dwindle away. There are close to 400,000 children in the system, and something must be done to improve their quality of life. There are so many organizations that host fundraisers and events to raise money and awareness. Foster Care Support Foundation is an organization where free clothing, infant equipment, and developmental toys are provided to thousands of children in foster care. To help, people can either donate their time or become a mentor, donate goods that can be given to the children, or donate money to help with the expenses. The great thing about the details of this organization is that it is doable for high school students like us to participate in. My goal is to have students in our school become involved with foster care volunteer opportunities within organizations like the Foster Care Support Foundation, and hopefully make some form of impact on other schools along the way. If we set aside bi-monthly events to devote our services to this cause, little by little, we will make a difference. We only have to offer our time, but in return, we are impacting the lives of so many foster children for the better. Foster care is a flawed system without a doubt. Problems like unqualified caseworkers, a lack of emphasis on reunification, and most importantly, moving around too often, all lead to serious behavioral and emotional issues. All of this then results in poor academic performance and does not set up a child in foster care for success in the adult world. The problems of foster care are all so significant because they involve the children of the world, which is our future. My proposal will get teenage volunteers involved in organizations that can make a difference to a few children in foster care, but you can all help too. Act now, spread the word, get involved, and make a difference.
Thank you, Esther. Nice job. Now we're going to hear from Talia Wittenberg. Talia.
Sorry. Who here here has ever sneezed in a classroom, and as you look around for a tissue, you realize all the boxes are empty. So you walk on down to the front office, but upon your arrival, you hear that the funding for tissues is gone. And who here has ever been placed in such an overcrowded classroom that you're not given the opportunities to succeed? Unfortunately, both above scenarios should apply to everyone in this room. And while you may think these problems are minuscule, they really only scratch the surface of the main problem that I want to cover: school's funding. But funding doesn't only affect whether or not we have tissues in a classroom. It can also affect how a student learns. Let me explain. All schools need money. It's needed in order to pay for programming and get the necessary resources to make a classroom continue. But the problem that surfaces is that there's not enough money to go around for everyone, which ultimately makes classroom sizes upsurge and budgeting too tight. And what happens when budgeting gets too tight? Budget cuts are made. Of all schools in America, you would be thinking that lower income schools would be getting more help and money from the government. But on the contrary, lower income schools get a fraction of what higher income schools get. The government tends to place its money where there's a promise of higher education, ultimately leaving many lower income schools without enough money to get the necessary resources. The Department of Education did a study that proved if 1% more funds were given to lower income schools, it could help them get the resources that they need tremendously. There's a helpful program at many schools called Title I, which is there to supply funding along with academic help to those who need it most. Title I programming supplies funds along with the already allotted governmental funds. Title I schools are even proven to use less of the government's money. In 2010, President Barack Obama created the blueprint for the reform of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Wanting to provide funds to everybody, the Department of Education decided that Title I comparability provision would be revised in order to ensure that state and local funding levels are distributed equitably between Title I and non-Title I schools. This means that the government was going to regulate in order to make sure that both Title I and non-Title I schools are getting the same amount of money. But for many schools, their budget cuts include the release of teachers, which ultimately leaves many classrooms without the necessary teachers in order to teach the room. In order to solve this problem, schools administration will make overcrowding in classrooms. NEA Today, a magazine directed towards educators, has even said that the reason for this overcrowding is because of the Georgia budget cuts. Class Size Matters, an organization that provides money to many schools in order to solve this problem, has let out statement after statement saying that classrooms with only 15 to 17 students have a higher rate of long and short-term benefits. In order to fund for more money, one thing that we can all do is fundraise. And while I know a fundraiser won't be able to pay for major things like the building itself or teacher salaries, we will be able to pay for more minor things like markers and tissues, which will ultimately make it so that teachers do not need to pay out of pocket for these things. In order to make these fundraisers, though, we will have a student fundraising committee called the Student Fundraising Union who will ensure the success of these fundraisers along with brainstorm more ideas. I personally plan to go to our administration and ask for permission to go around our school collecting a successful group of students to run this committee. But in order to pay for more major things, two things we can do are hold an annual fundraiser and a phone-a-thon. How the phone-a-thon would work is that students would volunteer to take time calling parents, corporations, and friends in order to ask them for money. The reason it would be completely student-run is because, let's be real, it's harder to say no to a child calling on behalf of their education than it is an adult. Each year, every family will also have a quota of how much money they personally need to raise. They will be able to raise this money through the Student Fundraising Union, who will plan these fundraisers. Along with this, every grade will be individually responsible to raise a certain amount of money for specific groups of teachers and their personal classrooms. But for the families who are unable to pay the quota, the student in the family will need to volunteer for community service. This community service will not only look great on our college transcripts, but it will also build our character and open us up to the world that we will one day need to walk into on our own. In conclusion, I know schools have their problems, and that only time can really fix many of them. But if we want to fix the educational system for this generation, then we need to work hard and we need to work together. Educating this generation properly means that we want to educate the world for years to come. So let's take care of our teachers and students in order to ensure a healthy, thriving, educated world for years to come. Thank you.
Great job, Polly. Thank you so much. And last presenter of the panel, our old friend, the dog.
Yes.
True or false? Bottled water can cost up to 100 times more than tap water. False. Bottled water costs 240 to 10,000 times more than tap water. Bottled water is one of the greatest threats facing America today. Bottled water is a waste of resources, a massive cause of pollution, and a nefarious industry. Several decades ago, few Americans drank bottled water, but in 2016, bottled water sales were projected to surpass soft drink sales and become America's most popular beverage. How did bottled water come so far? Not because Americans are thirstier today, not because bottled water yields health benefits, and not because our tap water is crude and contaminated. Bottled water's growth can be attributed to one thing: aggressive marketing. Advertising has convinced Americans that bottled water is safe, that bottled water is healthy, and that bottled water is pure. Of course, the victim of this campaign has been tap water, which the companies have tried to delegitimize. Ironically, 45% of bottled water is derived from municipal sources, a fancy way of saying tap water. And furthermore, the bottled water industry's claims about the superiority of their product are largely false. In 2008, the Environmental Working Group compared the amount of contaminants in bottled and tap water, and it found that the two types of water had similar level of contaminants. Some bottled water brands even exceeded the legal limit for contamination. Despite popular belief, there is no reason to buy bottled water for safety concerns unless you live in Flint, Michigan. Bottled water is not healthier, safer, or purer than tap water. Here's a fact. To produce one bottle of water requires 3 times the volume of water that bottle can hold. In a world where water is becoming a precious resource, this waste of water for a useless product is absurd and dangerous. But water isn't the only thing it takes to make a bottle of water. One way to think about the amount of crude oil it takes to manufacture a bottle of water is to imagine your bottle 1/4 filled with oil. But additionally, huge amounts of energy are spent to produce these bottles. Not only is energy required to manufacture these bottles, but bottling, packaging, and transporting the bottle to the consumer also requires copious amounts of energy. The cost in energy is far too high, and our supply of oil is far too low for us to be consuming so much bottled water. Producing bottled water is costly, but disposing of it is a whole other issue. Bottled water is made out of polyethylene terephthalate, or PETs, which, rather than biodegrade, photodegrade, break down slowly into tiny fragments. Those fragments absorb toxins and can pollute our environment. Bottled water contaminates our water systems, destroys our soils, and sickens our animals. Well, you might ask me, doesn't recycling solve this problem? No, it really doesn't, because 80% of bottles aren't recycled. This is a big problem. Our oceans are filling with plastic. Far out in the Pacific, plastic trash floats in a massive vortex. Fish now have plastic-filled stomachs. Bottled water is an important contributing factor to this global pollution problem. Bottled water may cause our waterways to look murky, but murkier still are the business practices of the bottled water industry. Nestle, a big player in the spring water industry, owning 1/3 of the market in the United States alone, has built an empire on seizing the water resources of small rural communities. Nestle approaches these communities, which are often impoverished, and promises to bring jobs if the community allows Nestle to build a plant and take control of the local spring. Then Nestle destroys the community's most precious resource, water. As Nora Shipman, an investigative journalist, explains, beautiful landscapes are destroyed, and the local spring, often very special in a small town, soon becomes a shadow of itself, or off limits altogether. Worse still, the promised jobs don't usually show up, and many of the workers that Nestle does hire are temporary. Nestle's water comes at a high price to the consumer as well as to the communities from which it draws. By law, bottled water companies are not required to disclose where they source their water. Guess where a lot of companies get their water from? Drought-ridden California. One of the states that needs the water the most is the prime source for the bottling of both municipal and tap water. The solution to this problem is clear. Stop buying bottled water. Across the country, there's a movement to simply ban bottled water. Numerous colleges, universities, and even the city of San Francisco have simply banned bottled water. Additionally, bottled water has been banned in the city of Concord, Massachusetts, now birthplace to 2 revolutions. To roll out a citywide or statewide ban seems beyond my abilities. But to ban all single-use plastic bottles from AJA seems a reasonable goal and one that could affect change. Because AJA consumes quite a few bottles of water. Even our beloved caterers sell this abomination. Banning bottled water from Atlanta Jewish Academy is a necessity. The ability of an individual consumer to affect company policy is limited, but if institutions such as Atlanta Jewish Academy were to ban bottled water, the effects would be much greater, and the ban would raise awareness in the community. I want to simply write this ban into school policy and eliminate plastic bottles from the upper and lower school campuses, and I'll facilitate this ban in every and any way possible. Thank you so much.
Let's have one more round for all 4 fantastic. Now, you would think their favorite part would be presenting their speech, but their favorite part is actually answering questions from the audience. Now, I encourage you to ask some questions to any member of the presentation group. Yes?
My question is all 4. Why did you pick the subjects you did?
Great.
Like, basically, our world is going to crash, and the environment is quickly becoming destroyed, and much of the data indicates that carbon emissions are heating up the globe and changing the climates or whatever. And so the government, they can do whatever they want, but they're not necessarily going to fix it through the government. I think the best way to fix this problem is for individuals to figure out ways that they can change their life, ways that they can change their life that will impact. So maybe not flying on airplanes or using public transportation. But I also think a big way is thinking about what we consume. So bottled water is like an obvious thing that's not really necessary, and a lot of the data just is completely fabricated, that we could eliminate from our lives and make a big impact.
When you answer your questions, it's good to stand up. Yeah.
So, truth be told, when I picked my cause fair, I was having a lot of issues with school itself. This was the beginning of the year. There were a lot of things about it that I just didn't understand the point of any of it.
Not this school.
And so, never this school. And so, I put together 2 and 2 of problems in school, and out came my cause fair.
I honestly just had seen the problem of foster care on TV and in movies and shows, and I just wanted to see if it was actually true what they were portraying it as on television. And I honestly just thought it was really interesting. And when I did more research and when I got to know the cause better, I'm very happy that I chose it, and that hopefully everyone will be impacted and get involved in different ways.
Good.
For me, I'm a very technology-first kind of person, and I have a lot of friends who I feel pay too much for the internet or have very slow internet, and they tell me they still pay a lot for it. So I figured something had to be up, so I looked into it, and I found all that.
Turns out you were right. Awesome. Great. Yeah, Mr. Shields.
So my question is for Mr. Flory. So I've been seeing a lot of commercials on TV recently about things like Comcast and AT&T, and then now they're starting to offer fiber. What's your take on that?
Well, I honestly believe that Comcast and AT&T offering fiber was a direct response to Google actually rolling out their Google Fiber service, which was Google trying to roll out their own service to compete with Comcast and AT&T. They have a lot of money, so they're probably one of the few people who could actually have a chance. But a lot of times when Google does that kind of stuff, they're doing it more as a scare tactic for the companies. Like to say, you guys should really update your stuff.
Because if you don't.
Yeah, Zoe.
I have a question for Talia. You mentioned schools with this Title I system have, use less money. What is the Title I system that you're talking about?
So Title I is kind of like its own organization where they raise their own money in order to give out to schools. It's kind of like how we have service learning. So while it's not just service learning, it also gives to other schools who don't need the academic help, they just need funding help. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, Dr. Jay, question for me. Made this topic very, very near and dear. You did a great job with it. I want to make a comment and ask you a question. So actually it turns out the situation is even worse because statistically my environmental science students can tell you why, but statistically tap water is actually safer to drink than bottled water. Did you find that in your research?
Yeah, I think I hinted a little bit to that at the beginning of my speech. So a lot of this stuff is being covered up by the bottled water industry with good cause. And yeah, no, I definitely found that in my research that a lot of times, not only did they compare the safety of tap water and found that in most places it's safer, not every place, most places, it's safer. But they also did taste tests and found that, and blind taste tests, people like the taste of tap water better than bottled water, and that a lot of the reason that people enjoy bottled, think it's special, whatever, is just the labeling or the marketing. They even did a thing where they bottled like hose water in these fancy bottles and they served it to people in this upscale San Francisco restaurant, and people could taste the difference between the different bottles of the same hose water just because of the label.
Very good. Other questions? Yeah, Moshe.
Hey, Don. So, I know that our school has been able to make certain rules, for example, us wearing a logo, and there are consequences if you don't wear that to school every day. But how can you enforce people to not bring bottles of water?
So I talked a little bit about this in my research paper. I think the key to this, because I really understand that, and I agree with this completely, that more rules is always going to get a lot of pushback from high schoolers. It's just how it works, unless the rules come from the high schoolers. So I think the first step for me would be to try to basically convince the majority of the student body that this is a worthwhile cause and have it be self-motivated as well as written into school policy.
Yeah, Nathan G.
Maynard, you're up again. Okay, so I was just wondering, like, if the bottled water was no longer available, like, what would be a plausible replacement? Like, how could people carry around water other than just a water bottle?
So you could have a water bottle, but in case you didn't notice, we have a water fountain. So that helps too.
The water bottle fills up water bottle.
And the water fountain water is perfectly safe.
Yeah.
A question for Brad. So I don't know a lot about technology, but if you use the fiber, like by yourself or with a small company, where is it going to what is it going to connect?
So,
how do you connect to the big internet?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure about the process of setting it up. But I do know that there are companies that specialize in it all around the country that you contract out for this kind of stuff.
And I have one more question.
Okay.
You saying that AT&T and Comcast has a secret agreement? That's really serious. Do you have evidence for that?
I found evidence online. I don't have it with me, but I'm pretty sure I found something relating to that.
And it's really solid?
It's fairly solid, I mean. I gotta find it to look again.
It's the internet. What could be wrong?
Yeah, so I have a question for Esty. I actually have a friend who I think she's she has fostered 3 or 4 children. And she's extremely wealthy, which is great because very often the expense that she runs into, medical, etc., is really great. And the stories that she tells me about these kids is amazing. Is there any, it seems to be a very expensive, it's expensive as it is right now, these kids having nowhere to be, but it seems like it's a very expensive endeavor. Is there any way that, or anything that you read about helping people to want to foster? Because I think that might be a block in many ways for people who want to take on a foster child, realizing this child, I'm not adopting them, they're no longer going to be with me after a certain amount of time, and I'm going to spend this kind of money.
Right, so many people want to foster, but they don't have the money that it takes to take on a child into their home. So foster care does provide monetary compensation and like other resources to the foster parents. One of the problems, though, it's often not enough. So I didn't address that in my solution, but that is something that needs to be solved. And I think if that was solved, the different types of homes that the children are getting put into would be much better, and the foster parents would want to do it more if they knew there was some form of stability for them to raise these children.
I have a question for Esky. Sorry. What's the vetting process like for foster homes? What does that look like? Because a lot of times in movies or movies they foster children get put in situations.
Right. So I didn't go into depth in my research, but it depends on jurisdiction. So it could be completely different from states. But once you are a foster home and once you're having children being brought to you, the caseworkers are supposed to come and check up on you to make sure you're actually what you say you are and that you're actually fulfilling your job as a foster home. Unfortunately, the caseworkers usually don't check in, so when children end up being abused and neglected and stuff like that, it's often not taught. So again, the vetting process probably needs to be upped a little bit also.
Yeah.
SD, great. So these foster kids, I assume they stay in the system until they're roughly 18.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to them after? Do they still stay connected, or are they just?
So once they're out of the foster system, are you asking about like their behavior once they're out?
Well, I mean, is there any help towards them once they leave, or is it the second they're 18, bye, you're done with us? Right?
Yeah, so the foster care and the foster families, they assist with aging them out. There are specific programs for that, but once they're out, they're pretty much on their own to fend for themselves. And again, once they're in society, they're usually not stable enough to go about living their life the way a normal person would. So they end up in jail, they commit crimes more often, they do all of these, they abuse drugs, alcohol. So yeah, there are systems for that, but I think they could be stronger also.
Great. Last question for Brad. Brad, are these fiber lines T1 lines? Is that what they are?
I don't believe so. I believe that fiber and T1 are different technologies. I can look into that though.
It's up there.
One question for Brad.
Oh, yeah.
How exactly is the fiber technology better than the regular AT&T and Comcast technology? What makes it different?
So more or less, a lot of the old lines that Comcast and AT&T are using are still the old copper wire lines, like that you see hanging up there, up on those, up on the wires. So more or less, those are older, very old technologies, and there's a theoretical limit that those can hit in terms of speeds. And we're starting to hit that. So fiber lines are buried underground and they can reach far faster speeds. And they're more future-proof, I'd say, than copper lines, which have been around for years.
So these are different sort of wire?
Yeah, it's a different type of wire.
Yeah.
Quick question for Talia. You were talking about a law that either Obama passed or attempted to pass about making sure that Title I and non-Title I schools receive the same funding. Do you know the status of that law? Did it pass? Did it not?
So it did pass, but it wasn't fully put into effect. Like it was kind of just passed and then it sat there on a table somewhere without being publicized like it should have been. The government did begin to work towards education and then they kind of quit, realizing how messed up the system actually was.
So if you don't mind a follow-up, how can we hold them more accountable? What do you think?
I mean, I guess if schools were to just, like as a unit, a school were to just be like to the government, yo, we need help, you can't leave us stranded like you did, then at least it put them into like, they'd consider what they should do.
I can find that.
I'm not 100% sure.
That's a great answer.
Any more questions? Yeah, there's one from Zoe, sure.
How did you transition, like most of what you talked about was public schools, right?
Yeah.
So, why did your cause fair, I know you originally wanted to do stuff more focused on private, well not private schools, but the problems that you face in school on a day-to-day basis and then go to private school. So, why did you transition and are you still drawn to this part of the cause?
So, personally, when I was like looking up all the information, the internet did not have a lot of what I was looking for. I tried for about 2 weeks straight to look for a lot of the issues we have here, but I couldn't find anything. And so I started concentrating more on public schools. But I think that a lot of the problems that are in public schools show a lot in private schools too. Like, there's still overcrowding and we still don't have enough teachers, which is happening now, and we still need more funding, and all these different problems, they still affect both kinds of schools. I just use the word lower income school, which refers to public schools that make less more often.
Do we get Title I in private schools, or is that only public?
Some private schools do, but not ours.
Yeah, Dr. J, question for Medad again. Medad, who regulates the bottled water industry?
So the bottled water industry, I believe, is regulated by the FDA. So how the division works is, it turns out that tap water is regulated by a host of agencies, including the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which ensures the quality of the water and contaminants, like I was talking about in my speech, and ensures quality. And whereas bottled water is regulated like packaged food or whatever by the FDA, which in fact leads to the fact that tap water is much more heavily regulated by the government, and is held to higher standards than bottled water. Tap water is held to a much higher standard.
Good answer.
Any other questions? We're peppering it, sure. Yeah.
I have a little question for Esty. Esty, did you, when you researched, did you find anything about keeping the child in his natural family? What is the process? I mean, how much are they trying to keep them in their family before they take them out to foster? And also, is adoption also an option in the horizon for those kids, or?
Yeah, so adoption is always an option, like if the foster parents are fostering the foster kids and they form some type of bond with them and it's a safe home and it gets approved by the caseworker, then adoption can always happen. But as for your question about getting put into the system, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what kind of effort is made to keep them in their family? Is there any protocol as how fast they taking out of the family to a foster, or is it very quick process or decision?
So getting reunified, like once they're put in foster care and they're looking at reunification with the original family, it's often overlooked. So I talked about that more in my paper, but caseworkers are not checking up often, and they're not really with the with their case. So if they think that they're not following up enough to really know if they should be being put back with their families. So reunification doesn't happen often. I think the number was 52%. I'm not positive, but I think that. And so also I didn't research mainly on getting put into the system, but I just know that the causes for that are homelessness, neglect, domestic abuse. So if people find out, if people find out that the children are being abused or neglected in their homes, then it's pretty quickly that they'll get put in foster care. But sometimes the parents will just abandon their kids and nobody realizes that the kids are alone and that they need help to be put in the system until someone comes into the house and realizes the kids have been abandoned and they need to be put in the system. So it varies a lot, and there's not really one solid answer for that. It just depends on the caseworker, on the situation.
So I feel like we have time for one more question. Moshe, I saw your hand was up. Maybe you answered it. Any one final question? Okay, so here's what I would like. Number one, I'm going to ask everybody to hang out in the room until the bell rings, just so we're not disturbing presentations that are still going on inside in other rooms. If you want to leave the room and just kind of float to the left so we're not going where the other rooms where people could still be presenting, I think that would be great. So there's another round of these, so if you're inclined to stay, and of course you're invited to stay, and if you're students, you're good to stay. But if you're a community member or a parent and you would like to stay and see another round of presentations, by all means stick around and watch another one. Remember, before you go, to vote with your $900 So in the hallway, sort of kitty corner from here, there's a bunch of boxes where all of the presenters have boxes to collect their donations. Your money is your vote, so you're voting with your dollars. So if you really like the presentation that you saw, give them some money to show it, okay? And in the meantime, let's have one more. Yeah.
About the money,
Yeah.
can I put more than one?
So I have no way of knowing if you do or not, but I would know it if you spread it around. Yeah. Oh, are you asking, can you put yeah, I want you to use all 3 of them. I would love it if you use 3 of them in 3 different boxes though. Great question. One last round of applause for these guys. Thank you so much for coming. The bell to end the session will ring in about 3 minutes. There will be a 5-minute intermission.
Hey Todd, I agree. The water bottle companies are a big conspiracy. It's fake. They're created by the Amish. To keep track of the Russians. The Amish are the most innocent force.
Oh, exactly. I saw right by Starbucks. I had no idea. My honor. Is it in this room?
He doesn't have a face. Where's Sam? Who's that? Yo, where do I give all my money at Brad? What's up, Brad? Yo, David, rip your bills in half so we have to.
Where are you staying here?
Where do I give all my money?
I'm staying here too. Can you save my seat?
Yeah.
Exactly. Make sure I'm
No one will feel
I think that's all we took What?
You're doing carpool. Is it your grade? No, your grandson.
Is it coming today?
Where are you staying?
Yeah, let me ask you. What is that? What do I do?
I don't know.
There's Robin.
I've never listen. Someone's mother was like, guys, what if she was like, what if I want to become mom? And someone was like, no. Everyone's like, she's like, I was like,
there's plus size bottles.
So funny. Harry, why are you answering?
Honda. And you parked a white Honda into a the other school is dismissing, so we need you to move that white Honda from the fire.
We're staying here. I'm going to see if I can go.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Go to Clovis.
with your father. With these different factors.
Can I watch the live stream while after?
And you also
That would be so meta. No, you should be on camera watching the live stream on the live stream.
Gabby,
Tell me,
No, actually, you should not be doing that. Still.
Evans was laughing.
You're gonna have to move. Get out of here. Don't make me.
They're going to Raphael. Are you sitting in that chair?
Ben, I swear to God, who ate all of it? Me and man. Yeah, I'm sick. Wow, great observation. I don't have practice. Under this horrible condition, $1,000 an hour. Who said that? What did we do? Oh, it was hilarious. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. She's like, what if I want to be a the model right now. I'm like, I don't think so.
Kathy, you're
Who said that to me?
Bad Zoe. No, I was just sitting on that. I get what? You don't get any Valentine's gift because you rejected me like a million times. That was her fault. She pushed me.
Jakob, I like the hole in your pants. Jakob, maybe you send me more. I want a nipple on
Nice. Maybe.
I want to tell you here. This nipple is annoying me. How do I block it?
Okay, don't put me down.
Wait, David. Jakob, I'm gonna tell her. I'm gonna go on a horror. Jakob, I'm gonna tell on you. Then we're gonna
tell on me to do, David.
I'm gonna tell you to mistake. Hey, Don. Ethan, were you in the one? That's it.
Were you in the one with Mr. Smoke? What happened? Who said that was you?
You spell ice cream.
He said that.
Oh, I said it wiped Honda.
You can have it
I meant to say it was a white Mazda wagon. So if you drove in a white Mazda wagon and it's parked in the parking lot outside of the school here, you move that guy.
That might have been me.
Here, you can actually have this. Don't do it.
No, I'm not. Zoe, I swear. Zoe.
It's still a phone somewhere. She came back.
Zoe.
That's no.
I want her to have
You want to go?
put on your keeper. It is on. Wait, I need to make yeah, oh wow, good observation. I can do it better. Best. No. Good I literally did.
He took mine. You're wearing a sweatshirt. Why would you roll up the sleeves? You might as well just get the new sweatshirt. Gabby, roll down your sleeves, please. Gabby, roll down your sleeves right now. Thank you. Thank you.
Ask him about something.
So he's already got the basic announcement for what's going on. So we have 4 presenters now. I'm just going to remind you that we want to make sure that we give them all our full attention. That we're staying in the room, that we're staying seated, that we're staying attentive, that Sam finds a seat that's not a roast lap. Sam, there is a great seat right up here. Got your name right on it. Figuratively.
Ron's lap is a seat.
And I know that you guys have seen the panel before, so you know, but just you are encouraged to ask tons of questions. They've been researching. They're experts in their field. They're dying to show off that knowledge. We just ask that you wait to ask those questions until after all 3 presenters have gone. And without further ado, so you going first?
Yep.
We're going to start with.
Try to stay awake now. All right.
Me too.
No, let's move it.
Within the gears and cogs of America lies a problem. Slowly eating through the government our founding fathers built to last for eternity. Corruption. Nobody is immune to political corruption, not even good old America. It harms everybody, reducing the poor to extreme poverty and only benefiting those who do not need any benefit. Corrupt politicians use your tax dollars as fuel for their own selfish needs or the needs of a minuscule percentage of Americans. Corruption wastes your money and eats through your rights as a human being and a citizen. There are many examples of political corruption throughout the world. An international example is the UN.
The United Nations Human Rights Council, even after supposed reform to properly protect those in need, still spends a disproportionate amount of time on Israel, even though they have recently added rights-abusing countries to its council, such as Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. In 2007, an anti-corruption task force was formed, but it was dissolved just 2 short years later. If the UN can't keep tabs on their own corruption, then why do we keep giving them our hard-earned money? South Africa is a great example of the effects of political corruption. They are widely known for their corrupt behavior. In 1995, 2,000 policemen defrauded their medical aid in a scheme of over 60 million rand, which is the currency there. With this country in shambles and a growing divide splitting its population in 2, President Jacob Zuma was still able to build his own personal city. So why did the people of South Africa tolerate it? A Gallup poll in 2014 found that 75% of Americans knew that corruption was widespread through the United States government. In 2013, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington called out 17 members of Congress as notable scamsters and 13 who engaged in serious misconduct. Representative Andrews from New Jersey used tax money to go to a wedding in Scotland. Representative Buchanan was accused of tax evasion. Dan Skelos, a representative of New York and a former member of the Senate, was convicted of corruption yet still received an annual pension of $96,000. But corruption isn't just in the faraway land of national politics. Corruption is in our own neighborhood. After a report of corruption accused DeKalb County of bribery and other corrupt acts, Governor of Georgia Nathan Deal ordered Georgia Bureau of Investigation to investigate these reports. A quick resolution dismissed the $885,294 of questionable spending. 2.5 years ago, DeKalb CEO Earl Ellis was convicted of corruption. Now, the interim CEO, Lee May, is under investigation for corruption. The issue of DeKalb is not a small problem. One of the investigators, Mike Bauer, said, "It's a mess. It's a total, complete mess." In the past few years alone, over 40 officials have been convicted on corruption charges. So why do we tolerate it? Overall, corruption is found in all different levels of society. In international organizations, in foreign poor countries, and rich governments and local governments, corruption is almost inevitable. In fact, corruption is unsurprising. It's not new. Corruption is wanted by individuals as it's powered by greed and the human need for more money and more power. Officials are so focused on their agendas and vendettas that they forget they're supposed to be representing the American people. The main issue of corruption is not the deed of corruption itself, but rather that corrupt politicians can still be considered esteemed politicians. President Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, once said, "The people are responsible for the character of their Congress. If that body be ignorant, reckless, and corrupt, it is because the people tolerate ignorance, recklessness, and corruption. If it be intelligent, brave, and pure, it is because the people demand those high qualities to represent them in the national legislature." The best way to solve corruption is to end tolerance of corruption locally. Most politicians start on a low level of government and work their way to the top of the food chain. If we stop corruption at its core in local politics, we will make a difference. We can do this by staying aware of local elections. People can call, write, and march to combat corruption. Social media is one of our most powerful tools. We can make a local Facebook page about staying aware, and anytime anyone comes across anything potentially scandalous, they can post on that page where all members will be notified. When issues arise, we can petition on that page, and with those signatures comes a stance that the government cannot ignore. If politicians know they are being watched by the small amount of people that have the ability to vote for them, they'll be forced to act in a manner more appropriate for their position. When an entire group comes out and states that they will not be voting for a candidate based on corruption allegations, the media will draw attention towards it, and it will soon be presented to the entire voting population. Politicians will soon learn that their actions have consequences. They will soon learn that they cannot get away with stealing our money, our freedom, or our rights. We have to hold them to a higher standard. Step up, listen, report, and hold your representatives accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Glad you ready? You did great. Nice to hear from my audience.
Yes. I don't maybe.
When walking through a first grade classroom, you see the brightly colored walls with posters of motivation, desks carefully ordered in perfect rows, and a woven rug in the front of the room. The students are seated joyfully, waiting for the teacher to capture their minds and take them to a new world of learning. The teacher begins the class with a new lesson, has practice sheets, and explains the homework. Then the students go home excited to go outside or play with friends, but upset to remember that they have homework. They open their bag to see a worksheet, grab a pencil, and start working. Homework has been around for hundreds of years, made as a tool to help students strengthen their brain through mental exercise. Unfortunately, teachers have not been assigning homework in the proper manner. Homework can be used to improve academic achievements, but this is frequently not the case due to teachers' lack of knowledge on child's brain development. Let's say a young student gets called on by the teacher in class to answer a question. She takes a guess, but the teacher instantly corrects her, resulting in the class to laugh at her. Later that night, that student sets out to do her homework and recalls an embarrassment she experienced earlier that day, leading her to do her homework with a negative attitude. This shows how when teachers don't make a positive classroom environment, students will take this out on their homework, and this cycle will continue if nothing is done. Creating a positive experience for the student inside and out of the classroom can impact their learning techniques when it comes to homework, such as the want to learn and the desire of the content, and the want to learn. The brain does not mature at the same rate for each person. Having a classroom full of students who are about the same age does not mean they are equally ready to learn a particular topic, concept, skill, or idea. It is crucial for teachers to understand that the maturity of the brain influences learning readiness. For teachers, this is especially important when designing lessons and selecting which strategies to use. Teachers need to understand this and be able to help each student grow at his or her own pace. The information on children's brains and memory is essential to understanding which type of homework helps students learn best. For example, a spelling worksheet. The student has one each week with new and different words. The brain is better at remembering when we repeat with consistency, not when we study in long, rather in small slots of time. This is called the spacing effect. The best result is to do a little bit of spelling each night, repeating the same words night after night, but students don't always take this on. Psychologist Henry Roediger recommends that if teachers give students plenty of little quizzes, which strengthens the brain's ability to remember, this will motivate the child to study nightly. They do not even have to be graded. It's the steady memory and repetition that matter. The teacher's job is to give the worksheet or whatever long-term assessment there is about a week in advance, so the student has time to fully grasp and understand the information. The teacher also needs to be aware that the student will be working on the information each night and refrain from giving any additional homework that will take away from that time. To prevent this, teachers use the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule is a homework system where each year 10 minutes are added to a student's homework load, keeping the homework levels reasonable and appropriate for every grade as their school year goes on. Teachers are not understanding the correct way to assign homework. However, with problems there are solutions. My solution is to explain to the head of school the issue at hand, informing him on the trend of inappropriate homework for young students and the lack of advanced achievements a student gains from it. Then I would advise the school to bring in educators to inform the teachers on the right way around homework. The educators can come in on teacher work days, where all teachers come and learn new different ways to educate effectively. After that, the school should start implementing the 10-minute rule. This will allow teachers to have a limit when assigning homework, so the students can focus on the work that's needed. They will be doing the work in the most effective manner. It is important that instead of allowing the homework for young students to be non-educational, action must be taken before it is overlooked that the homework isn't helping, and before this useless homework continues to be assigned. It is important for children's brains to expand and grow with simple tasks, practice, and assessments. With your support, we can reinforce what has been forgotten about homework for much too long. With your support, we can help these children come to their full academic potential. Thank you.
And last and furthest from least, David Foden.
Probably what? Yeah. Imagine the year 2025. You're going to work. Instead of having to drive an hour or so as you did less than a decade ago, you're no longer the one driving. Instead, the passenger in the driverless car. Spend that time doing many different things: checking your email, eating breakfast, and watching Netflix. Having a driverless car is not only giving you extra time to do stuff, you haven't gotten into an accident since you bought it 7 years ago. Driverless cars are making the road safer, giving you extra time, and have allowed for traffic nationwide to be greatly reduced. This technology is being made today and might be available in less than 2 years, but we might not reap the benefits. Many Americans fear this technology, truly without reason to. According to a AAA survey, 3 in 4 U.S. drivers are afraid of driving in a self-driving car. This fear that many people have is based on misinformation and ignorance rather than facts. And this fear will slow down an innovation that can save tens of thousands of lives a year, saving people more than an hour a day currently wasted on driving, and saving Americans billions of dollars per year. We are getting closer and closer to driverless cars being commercially available day by day. There's no doubt that the technology will soon be available, but depending on how we embrace it, the amount of lives and accidents that will be prevented changes. We're already seeing this life-saving technology in action, as seen through a recent article by Vivek Wadhwa in the Washington Post, in which Mr. Wadhwa talks about his experiences with his Tesla and his self-driving software called Autopilot. Mr. Wadhwa feared putting his life in the hands of software, just as 3 in 4 Americans did. But on an empty highway with easily visible lines, he decided to test it out. He let go of the steering wheel and let the software take control. The car continued to drive normally, without any input from the driver. Mr. Wadhwa believes that once people get behind the one, they too will be checking emails as he did. They'll feel as comfortable with software driving cars as they are with software flying their airplanes. He even had an accident prevented by Tesla software. A car from the right jumped into his lane just as the setting sun blinded him. His car automatically slowed down and gave way. This is just one of the many cases where Tesla software have prevented an accident. Mr. Wadhwa closes out his article with, the best part is driverless cars will give it pesky, dangerous human drivers with the horseless carriage into the horse and buggy, banish them from the roads. And by doing that, they hope to save thousands of lives a year and billions of dollars. People may be surprised by the fact that the building blocks towards self-driving cars are already in today's vehicles. But today's technology isn't close to what self-driving cars will bring. Full self-driving technology does much more than save time and money. It saves human lives. An estimated 32,675 people died in 2014 in car crashes. The Eno Center for Transportation, a think tank, notes that driver error is believed to be the main reason behind over 90% of all car crashes. And who knows what those people do with their lives? But for this technology to be commercially viable, it must be safer than humans are. In a recent study by the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, Google's self-driving cars were found to be involved in fewer accidents compared to human-driven vehicles, showing that even at the early stage they're currently at, they're safer than humans. The company's fleet has just been involved in 17 crashes over the past 6 years, with none of the incidents being the fault of the self-driving cars. Google's self-driving cars are proving much safer than humans, even where they're currently at. The Tech Times news outlet reported that the study also found that the crash rates for traditional cars and all the indicated levels of severity were higher when compared to the crash rates of self-driving cars, only backing up the claim that self-driving cars are already safer. The lack of openness from the American people about embracing this new technology has meant that regulators and parts of the government are less pro-self-driving cars than they really should be at this stage. At the federal level, the NHTSA is very pro-self-driving cars, regulating them reasonably and ensuring that they're going to be safe before they become available. The problem is with state governments, where some have even called for and passed a ban on Tesla sales. This lack of will to work with self-driving cars is what is causing the technology to be slowed down, since they don't have the ability to do more research and sales. To do our part, I've created a letter that will be sent to the Georgia State Legislature that I hope you'll sign. Georgia State Legislature is commissioned a study on driverless cars, but truly, more needs to be done in our state to make sure we are ready for driverless cars. The letter asks for the legislature to make specific laws regarding driverless cars and testing them. The goal of this letter is to get the state legislature to make the necessary laws for driverless cars to be driven in Georgia once they are ready. These will be laws that later pass like those in California, which allow for testing of driverless cars through the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, the NHTSA, as I mentioned earlier. It also allows them to make regulations and restrictions regarding driverless cars that are reasonable. In the letter, it also asks for the state legislature to allow research to be done here in Georgia, and to start getting the infrastructure needed for driverless cars in place. This is done across the United States. We're ready for driverless cars when they come. We are in the driver's seat when it comes to this technology, and we will decide which road it will go down. We can either allow this technology to save tens of thousands of lives by going down the road in which we disprove the fear that many Americans have of this technology, or we can go down the other road, where we keep this fear of driverless cars, and when the technology becomes available, we don't help promote it, but rather continue to fear and delay it. Whether or not we fear driverless cars when they become available will determine whether or not the technology actually becomes mainstream. If you want to save time, money, and lives, then we need to show people just how great this technology is. The fear we have now doesn't have to continue, and it can't. When people think of driverless cars, they shouldn't fear giving up control. But be excited for the time, money, and lives that will be saved.
Great job, Posey. Thank you so much. All right. I know that now all three presenters would love to hear another round of applause. So you may think that their favorite part is their speeches, but it's not. It's answering the question. So I do ask and I encourage you, they want to show off their knowledge. They want to show how much they know about their topic. So please do pepper them with the toughest questions you can think of, starting with Nicole.
Okay, my question is for Nathan. So correct me if I'm wrong, from what I heard, you think that self-driving cars will save more lives, right?
Yeah, because 90% of all car crashes are caused by human error.
Okay,
And then you could also use the money that are spent on preventing car crashes. You could spend on making sure that the computer systems that control the traffic that might mess up and, let's say, a red light goes off and someone speeds through, you could spend the money on fixing stuff like that.
Okay. So there's always like the idea of, technology failing, the Samsung 7 or whatever that exploded, the little rolly thingies that explode. Like, we can't always count on technology. So, and we can't always count on technology. And then there's always also on the flip side, when you're driving, let's say someone is coming, I don't know, switch lanes, they don't see you, human instinct, whip the wheel or something. But you can't always be sure that that's going to happen with technology. So my question is, how exactly is it decreasing, all the injuries and death rates if there isn't that human instinct component in the self-driving car?
Well, because
can you stand up and answer?
Because there's enough sensors that, first off, when you're driving, you can't see 360. You have blind spots. And that's also a huge part of the problem is you have blind spots. You can't see things. Because you can, driverless cars also have way more power than just thinking what to do next. And by using the scanners and sensors, they're like, if you had a car moving and behind you to the right, someone pulls you off to the left, it's going to be an accident. It can decide either to slow down at a certain rate of speed by calculating the speed of that car behind you. And so it could go either slow enough to go around or maybe even go if someone cut you off on the left, maybe it goes behind that car and takes over where it was. Because it's possible to do that because it's going so fast. It's taking in so much information, calculating so much so quickly that it knows what to do. The problem is, with humans, is if somebody cuts on our left, you're most likely just going to hit that person because you're not quick enough to just change lanes. And if you do, most of the time, the person will just go to the right, and just instinctively to save themselves, and that will likely also cause another accident. And then you have multiple car pilots and more stuff. By having self-driving cars, you won't have that. Especially with multiple co-pilots, first off, sensors, you don't have to have just camera sensors. You can have radar, so when there's fog and there's multiple car pilot and you can't see that, it will, and it can go around. And also, by allowing computer systems to control traffic, you can also route self-driving cars around that.
And is this all in theory, or it's been experimented?
No, Google's self-driving cars, and also, it's not just like Google and Tesla, there's Audi, BMW, and there's a bunch of other companies too. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of, Google's self-driving cars, when tested, do this. They're able to go around and, just do it. In California, there have been a few situations that happened, they have video coverage of it, and it's really interesting to look. There was a bus that slammed on its brakes in front of a Google driver's car, and it stopped and backed up a little. That was really cool to watch. Yeah, and it's been shown, and also with Tesla, it's been Teslas are used a lot more on highways than Google's cars have been, but yeah, it's been shown. Yes.
Great answer, Mr. Wilson, next.
I have another question. My question is for Nathan. Do you foresee equitable access or lack of financial resources as being a potential barrier toward the masses embracing this driverless technology? You mentioned that in a survey, most people are fearful of it, and you also mentioned that experiencing helps to alleviate some of that fear. I personally can't afford a Tesla, so other people who are in the financial bracket with me, do you think that our lack of access toward the technology would slow down us embracing?
Well, it's gonna. I mean, the technology isn't available currently, so I mean, but the newest Tesla, the Model 3, is going to be $35,000 starting off. Of course, with all. Actually, if you bought it when it comes out, like it will come with the sensors and stuff to become self-driving. Just you would have to pay for the update. But like they won't be. First off, the technology is already integrated into most vehicles. Like most 2017 models have a bunch of aspects of self-driving cars, like sensors to do auto braking, which is a huge part of driverless cars, and also the detectors on the side of many 2017 models. There are sensors on the side to just detect when a car is near you if you're drifting into another lane, and that stuff is integrated because you're always going up in technology with automobiles. Like you're gaining new stuff. Like when you had a lot of stuff now have the dashboard that have like tablets or something like that stuff. Automobiles go at this rate of technology that price is just generally integrated to that. So by the time we have fully self-driving cars, the prices just won't jump up, and if they do, it'd be by at most $5,000 for like for no recall. The average car price in the U.S. is $32,000. You add $5,000 to that, you don't have to drive. You can spend that time doing other stuff. I mean, like over time, it's gonna be really good.
I'd like to take Posey off the spot and get some questions for other people. So if you have a question for Yitzi or Mayan, yeah.
I actually have a question for both of them.
Perfect.
So for Yitzi, you were saying how corruption is inevitable and how pretty much every politician these days has some sort of corruption involved with them. So if we're going to prevent this, how do you suppose we can totally prevent it where it seems like it's inevitable?
So the reason it's almost inevitable is because like human greed is just something that comes along with being human. And we can prevent it by like, if they know that the 1,000 people that are voting for them are like watching them very intently, they know like, oh, if I do something, then they're not going to vote for me, because why would they want someone who's corrupt in office? So if we make it clear that they know that we're watching them, then they cannot do that.
And my question for Mayan is, I know that there's a lot of people that are saying how homework for like third grade or second grade and below is just useless and it should just be like abolished, like there should be no more homework for those grades. Is that like your standpoint on this, or is it like a different idea?
Okay, so I honestly think that it's okay to have homework. I think that it practices skills, that it strengthens the brain, like I spoke about. But I just think that my focus kind of was that they're just giving the wrong homework because teachers don't really understand the brain.
So my question is for Yitzi. So you mentioned as part of your solution the idea of a Facebook page where the community would be able to keep track of corruption that's going on, right? What concerns me is the idea that when an accusation is made against a politician of corruption, the sort of mob mentality that would come out of that might mean that even if they are found to not be guilty of that corruption, the damage may already be done. So do you have any kind of suggestions for how to eliminate, or at least make not so bad, that possibility?
So I think that where most people will get their information from is the media. And so if the media accuses someone of doing something really, really bad, and then everyone's like, oh, I hate that guy, he's such a terrible person. I mean, these are the people that they don't just check the news once every 2 years, they check it like pretty frequently. So then the media will say like, oh, it turns out we were wrong, or something like that, where... Yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Where they won't just leave everyone like, it's kind of their duty to report on the corruption, also to be honest with us, which I guess is also a major issue with media dishonesty.
So I feel like we have time for one more question. Gabi, you had your hand up a while?
I have a question for everyone.
Okay, let's make them short responses.
Including me? Okay, Yitzi,
for you. So you said that.
Oh, so you have 3 questions.
Yeah, for each person.
All right, so pick your favorite.
Oh, my favorite. I'll go with Yitzi. Why not? It's already up there. Okay, so you said that people like go back and they change they change it, like if it says something bad about someone, then they'll change it and say, oh, we were wrong. So there was something in Canada like a couple of weeks ago. There was a shooting in a mosque, and a lot of news channels reported as a Moroccan that did it. But then later on, it became known that it was actually a white male that did it. But most news channels didn't change like the title. The title stayed Moroccan thing. So how would we can't change that?
Right. So I'd say like, how do you know that it wasn't the Moroccan guy? I mean, if you have a group of 200 people, then chances are one of them is going to know. Like, we have a room of people here, and you might be the only person who knows that. That one person, that's the beauty of having like a Facebook page, because one person can have their voice heard in the group.
Awesome. So, first of all, I would say thank you to all of you for coming in. So I don't have to deal with the comment as well. I'm just going to ask them in the hallway questions. I want to remind you to vote with your dollars. So, thank the presentations you saw that you liked the best, and vote for